quiet meeting can fool a leader. Everyone's nodding, no one pushes back, the agenda moves forward, decisions get made. From the front of the room, it looks like alignment, but sometimes it's not. Don't be fooled by a quiet meeting. People are not aligned. Sometimes they're just waiting for the meeting to finish so they can finally say what they really think. I've seen this more times than I can count. The meeting ends, laptops close, people stand up, make a polite comment about next steps, and walk out like the issue is actually settled. But then 10 minutes later, someone's standing in my doorway saying, I didn't really want to bring this up in the meeting, but... That sentence tells you something. And once that pattern repeats, the organization has created a second room. And that second room is where the truth is at. The real problem may not be the decision, it may be what the people have learned about the room where the decisions are made. I used to think meetings after the meeting were just part of organizational life, and really some of them are. Every workplace has side conversations. We need to. It's healthy. People need time to process. Not everyone thinks clearly in the room full of people, and they might need a few minutes or the drive home to really think through things. That part's normal. But there's a difference between processing and avoiding it altogether. Processing sounds like, hey, I've been thinking more about what we discussed. Avoidance sounds more like, I didn't want to say this in there. But that sentence should probably bother you more than you think. It means the room that you were leading was teaching people something. Maybe nobody said, don't challenge what I'm saying. Maybe no one was punished in some obvious way. Maybe the leader would honestly say, you know what, I really want people to speak up. But people don't judge a room by what a leader claims to value. They judge it by what happens when tension is created. They watch for the first response. They notice things like interruption, that quick explanation, the slight defensiveness in your tone, the way a leader moves on before the concern has enough room to actually breathe. I've watched people start to say something, glance toward the boss, and decide not to say what they're going to say. And that's not always fear. Sometimes it's just experience. That's how the rooms get trained. Not always through intimidation. Sometimes it's for the sake of efficiency. I had a leader that later became my mentor, and he changed the way I thought about meetings. Not because he had some brilliant meeting structure, he just had a very different posture. He would present an idea, explain the direction, and then ask the team, all right, gang, what am I missing? And then he'd wait. Here comes that silence. Not that fake kind of waiting, though, where everyone knows the leader's already made the decision, and it's just a rhetorical question. He actually waited. And if no one answered, he didn't treat the silence like agreement. He got more specific. He said, all right, who sees risks in this? Whose department's going to feel this the most? What assumptions am I making that might not be accurate? That kind of question changes the room because it tells people the leader's not just allowing input, they're asking for it. They want the input. And there was nothing theatrical about it. He wasn't performing humility. He wanted to find weaknesses in the decision before reality found it for him. And people responded to that. They didn't become reckless. The meeting didn't become chaotic and just go off the rails. They just started contributing earlier. People were bringing up issues while there was still time to adjust the plan. And someone could say, listen, I understand the goals here and I agree with it, but this part might be harder than it sounds. The difference showed up after the meeting too. There was less need for that meeting after the meeting because more of the real conversation had already happened in the room. This is one of the best things I've learned from my mentor. Better meetings aren't the ones where you have all the answers to the questions that people are asking. Sometimes they come from making it safer for people to ask questions in the first place. If your first response feels like a verdict, then the conversation is going to get smaller. If it feels like curiosity, well, then the conversation is going to expand. And I wish I could say that I always led that way, but I didn't. I can look back now and recognize times when I probably trained people to be careful around me and just to agree with me. I didn't mean to, but I'm sure I did. I thought I was being prepared. I thought I had to be efficient. I thought I had the context that other people didn't have, and I had the answers. But sometimes I was just closing the door faster than I really realized. Someone would share a concern and I might say something like, well, we've already considered that, or come up with a risk and I'd say, well, we already made up a plan for that if that happens. Or maybe they'd ask a question and I'd answer it right away instead of exploring it. There's a difference. Answering a question can close a conversation. Exploring a question can open it. And if a leader closes enough conversations, people stop bringing questions into the room. Not because they stopped having questions, because they've adapted, and people adapt very quickly. If concerns are met with quick explanations and answers, people will stop bringing concerns. If risks are met with just general kind of empty reassurance, people stop naming the risks. If questions feel like they're met with resistance, people will stop asking them. And then the leader gets agreement, and it looks like trust, but it's really probably just caution. The kind of caution that can look professional. And that's what makes it very dangerous. The meeting moves faster, the agenda stays cleaner, the room moves more smoothly. A leader can mistake that for a good meeting, and sometimes it's just not. It's withdrawal or withholding. Sometimes they're withholding their opinions, but they're still thinking. They still see the gaps, they still know where the plan might break, but they're just having those conversations somewhere else. And most good thinking, creative ideas, that doesn't come out fully formed. People talk their way toward the real issue and through the problems. They start with something, maybe an incomplete thought, before they can explain it exactly. That's just creatively working through the problem solving. And sometimes at first that version might come out awkward, but a leader has to leave enough space for the better version to eventually show up. And that's harder than it might sound, especially when you're under pressure, or you've got deadlines to make, or there's just realities that we have to move quickly. In high pressure rooms, people are already careful. The stakes get higher. Words carry consequences. Nobody wants to be labeled as negative or difficult or someone who's just always got to have a problem with any idea. That's not what they want to be. So people will edit themselves. And if the leader's hard to challenge, they will edit themselves even more. And that editing has a cost. The cost is reality. Leaders are making decisions with less information than they think that they have. And that might be the most dangerous part about the meeting after the meeting. The leader may never know what didn't get said. The metrics might look fine, the project may move forward still, but the decision might not have been the best decision, and it's shaped by fewer insights than were available to inform it. That loss of information, it might look like decisiveness and quick action. It might look like alignment. Heck, it can even look like leadership. But sometimes the leader is simply losing access to reality. And the higher a leader rises, the easier that becomes. Most people aren't trying to deceive anyone. They're trying to survive the environment in front of them. And they learn what kind of information travels safely up the chain. And they learn what leaders can handle other opinions. And they learn what leaders aren't open to other things. And they learn which leaders they need to be very careful raising questions around. Once people are spending more energy trying to manage a leader's response to questions or concerns than solving the problem in the first place, the culture is in trouble. I've been in rooms where people were not really discussing the decisions anymore. They were reading the leader, deciding how they should respond, how they should raise the question, who's going to bring it up? Is this worth even bringing up in the first place? I've also had people bring up great points after the meeting with more clarity and confidence than they ever showed inside the room. And that always bothered me because it meant the thinking was there, the room just didn't get access to it. That's expensive. Energy that should go towards solving a problem is spent actually trying to manage a leader's reaction to concerns. That leader is probably going to walk out of the meeting, say that went well, but that's the danger of the meeting after the meeting. It tells you the formal room is not holding the real conversation. And when the formal room can't hold the real conversation, leaders lose access to information that they need. The organization still functions, metrics might still look good, but decisions are being shaped and made by fewer variables than are available to inform them. The strongest teams I've worked with weren't teams that always agreed. They were teams where disagreement surfaced early enough in the process to be useful. Someone could say, listen, I don't think we've thought enough about this. Or they might say, listen, this might work on paper, but operationally it's going to be a lot harder than you think. And that thinking was welcomed. Those moments weren't always comfortable. Sometimes they exposed some tension. Sometimes they got heated. Sometimes they made a clean plan messy again. That's not dysfunction. It's a decision getting better. I think some leaders resist that because disagreement can feel personal when you're the one carrying accountability for things. I understand that. When the results sit with you and you're accountable to them, questions might feel like resistance. Concerns might feel like doubt. Pushback can feel like lack of support. But often the question is not undermining the decision, it's trying to strengthen it. The concern isn't always negativity, sometimes it's stewardship. And the person slowing the room down may be preventing a much larger problem down the road. There's a verse in Proverbs that I really think applies in this situation. It says, "The heart of the discerning acquire knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out." What stands out to me is the posture. The ears of the wise seek it out. Wisdom doesn't sit back and say, well, nobody told me. I asked staff and nobody raised their concerns, so we didn't know this would blow up. There are times when leadership requires more than just being available. It requires seeking out what people might be hesitant to share with you. You got to notice when the room goes quiet, or if everyone's just agreeing with you, or if they're kind of squirming in their chairs and looking at each other like, does anybody want to tell him what he needs to hear? I don't want to be the one to say it. You do it. Because people are often telling leaders the truth in fragments. Maybe a softened comment. They try to soften their language, or a person who used to contribute is no longer saying things to those signals before they really become consequences. I don't think the goal is to eliminate every side conversation. That's just not realistic. Probably not healthy either. People need space to process. They need trusted relationships where they can think out loud. And not every concern is ready to be voiced the moment the issue's raised. But if the most honest conversation keeps happening after the meeting, a leader should pay attention. That pattern is telling you something. It may be telling you the room is moving too quickly. It might tell you that disagreement is not as welcomed as you think it is. It may be that you're responding to concerns with correction instead of curiosity. It might be telling you that the organization is valuing agreement much more than it values discernment. And the answer to that is not another speech on the importance of transparency. It's not another reminder that, hey guys, I got an open door policy, always pop in anytime. The work happens at the next meeting. It happens in the first response to a concern that someone raises. It happens when the leader asks, all right, what am I missing? And then the silence. Wait long enough for honesty to have a chance to come through. The healthiest organizations are not ones without tension. They're not the ones where everyone agrees quickly. The healthiest organizations are the ones where people trust the room enough to bring their best thinking into it. And maybe this is one of the quieter tests of leadership. Not whether people will talk after the leader leaves the room, they will, but whether the conversation that mattered most was allowed to happen before everyone walked out.